Attention sports teams. Let us introduce you to the best fan engagement tool in the game, .vote. By getting a .vote web address for your team, you can allow fans to engage and interact with big-time decisions. In a single click, not only can fans make their opinions heard, but sports teams get a better understanding of their fans' interests. Keep your fans engaged. Simply visit GoDaddy.com today, type in the desired name of your web address, and let the voting begin.
College football is a cesspool, why bad pitchers are getting big money in baseball free agency, and the most surprising NBA team so far this season. All that and more straight ahead on a new edition of Gordon Damer on Sports. Welcome in, fresh episode of Gordon Damer on Sports. Plenty to discuss for this edition. We will take a little break from the NFL stories and all the gambling stories that we've talked about the last few, but we'll focus on the baseball hot stove and why bad pitchers, high ERA pitchers, are getting such great contracts so far. We'll talk about the most surprising NBA team, at least so far as we hit December, and we'll talk about the one football story, not NFL, but the one football story that everybody is talking about. And how it's probably just the start of a new normal. But before we do any of that, please do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. It really does help out the podcast. Whatever platform you are taking the podcast in on, especially YouTube, if you could hit subscribe, it really does help out the podcast and help it grow. Hopefully you saw the tweet that I put out of our Nick Ticket giveaway winner enjoying the game, just to show you people really do win on Gordon Damer on Sports. But this is just a way of reminding you, please hit that subscribe button. It really does help out the podcast. All right, let's get into it. And I guess where we will begin for this episode, where should we begin? Oh, yeah, that's right. College football is an absolute cesspool. I don't know any other way to put it after what we just witnessed with the Lane Kiffin fiasco from this past weekend. I don't understand what other takeaway you could have. You know, college football, I've always viewed it as the NFL's minor league, like the NFL's little brother. But at this point, it's almost like the little brother is hooked on steroids with no supervision. I mean, he's just like living with the wolves at this point. College football is professional sports, but without any professionalism whatsoever. It is just a money-making operation. It's a billion-dollar industry dressed up as student athletes competing for their school, when really it's just a money machine. It's TV money, it's booster money, it's NIL money, and the only part about the whole operation that isn't professional in any way is the actual structure of college football. And that was on full display with everything that happened with Lane Kiffin this weekend. The Lane Kiffin circus that we just witnessed, that was college football in its purest, most unfiltered form. That was college football taking all the lunacy and the hypocrisy and the greed, especially the greed, and the self-interest, and just turning up the notch a little higher, just to 11. And nobody was talking about anything else for this weekend, because how could they? We had, just in college football alone, we had a playoff bracket dropping, right? You have conference championship matchups getting locked in. And the only thing anyone, and any storyline that anyone really cared about, they broke into it on the red zone. They had a little scroll at the bottom of the red zone, was about how the coach from the number 7 team in the country was packing his bags in the middle of a national championship run. A guy who, I might remind you, has never sniffed a national championship as a head coach, just bailing on his team. Imagine how full of crap the Ole Miss players now know Lane Kiffin is. Maybe they knew that already, but it's unbelievable. So let's start with the first part of this perfect storm, and that, of course, is the college football schedule. Now, there's this thing in fantasy football where it's called a gridiron league, where you get the winning teams get to pick players off the losing team's rosters. It's almost like a King of the Hill and fantasy sports combined. But that's fantasy football. That's something you play with your friends. College football essentially has the same kind of thing because of their moronic schedule. Lane Kiffin had to make the decision on his future now because college football operates on the dumbest calendar in the history of major sports. Any sport, any league, any country. Try to explain the college football calendar to anyone who's even a college football fan. It's the dumbest thing that you could think of. Imagine having, in college football, you have the coaching carousel, National Signing Day, the playoff, and the transfer portal all in like a 2-week window. Imagine free agency in the middle of the World Series, or an NFL head coach leaving his team as they're getting ready to play on Wild Card Weekend. That can't happen because those sports, as much as you might hate Roger Goodell or Rob Manfred, they have people in those leagues that can tell those teams you can't do that. College football is too big for any one person, and nobody is actually running the sport. It's unbelievable. National Signing Day, the early one, which is now the real one, that comes up on Wednesday. I don't know when you're listening to this, but we're putting this out on Wednesday. And that's right in the middle of Conference Championship Week. And that is right on the doorstep of the college football playoff. So while these teams, supposedly the best teams in the country, are preparing for their biggest games of their season, coaches are also looking for the next great payday, because that's just what coaches do in college sports. The next ridiculous contract. And these schools, they're just falling all over each other when they have a vacancy like LSU had. And now with the boosters and the NIL money, never before have you had people not employed by the schools determining what schools do more now than ever before. It's absolute lunacy. It is the Wild West. And oh yeah, by the way, the transfer portal, which is basically free agency, that opens in the middle of the playoff, just in case it wasn't chaotic enough. Now, if you're not a college football fan, you might think, well, that's kind of insane. Yes, it is. It is insane. You're absolutely right. But this is what happens when no one is in charge. There's no single commissioner. The NCAA is still around, but they have no real power in this situation. There's no centralized authority. There's no Adam Silver. There's no Roger Goodell. There's no one to say, hey, guys, maybe let's try to put this on a schedule that kind of works for everybody. So the biggest part of our season, the games, are not overshadowed by the sideshow. The sideshow's fun. But between the NCAA and the playoff committee and the conferences and the TV networks and the legislators and the individual schools and boosters, every single one of these groups thinks that they're actually in charge, and none of them are in charge, and this is what you get. College football is now like a puppet show where every puppet has their own puppeteer pulling the strings in completely different directions. And the result, the perfect storm, is what we saw play out this weekend with Lane Kiffin. You get on a full-on circus on national television. You have the media chasing down his planes and seeing what it was like NORAD on Christmas Eve. Where's Santa? It was entertaining, I will give you that. But at the end of the day, it might be an entertaining joke, but it's still a joke. So let's get to the guy who's at the center of all this, and of course that's Lane Kiffin, because if you went to Hollywood and got a great screenwriter to create a character that embodies every ridiculous characteristic of college football, you would end up with Lane Kiffin, or at least something pretty close. He is the centerpiece of this entire saga. And if he had just said, after the season, hey, you know what? I had a great time here in Ole Miss. I've done a good job based on how their season went if they didn't win a championship. But you know what? LSU's a bigger job. It's a better opportunity. I'm leaving. People would have been upset at Ole Miss, sure. But these things happen all the time. It would have been a one-day story. But and look, the sport has never had more movement than it's had now. But that's not what happened here, because the schedule couldn't wait until after the season was over. LSU can't wait till the season is over. That's too late. They need somebody in place now. That's probably why they fired Brian Kelly when they did. So all the things that Kiffin said about loving Ole Miss and saying that, I needed them more than they needed me. And then the first opportunity to get out the door, he goes out the door, and people will say, well, what was he supposed to do? Well, he didn't have to take the LSU job right now. I would think what you do is you finish the one job before you take the next job. And by the way, I don't know if you noticed, these jobs, they come open all the time. But Lane Kiffin is such an egomaniac and clearly looked at the Ole Miss job as beneath him. LSU, that's where I'm supposed to be. And based on the schedule of college football, that allowed him to make this move now. But he was going to make this move no matter what. And he's not leaving a 7-5 team that's getting ready for the Poinsettia Bowl. He's leaving an 11-1 team with a real chance to win a national championship. and he's leaving it for a better job. And that is true. LSU, people have kind of gone back and forth with this. LSU is a better job. It absolutely is. LSU is college football. That's one of the blue blood programs. They have better resources and more tradition and a monster recruiting base and an NIL budget that would, make any other team kind of blush. And they've got a bigger stadium. And if you want to win big and not just have a good season here or there, it would seem like LSU is one of the places that you would go. So I don't think that anybody really would begrudge him going if he went at the right time. And Louisiana is known for having, high school talent. It's the only real powerhouse school. And Ole Miss, it's a nice operation. They've grown a lot. Lane Kiffin did a really great job there. They're better than they are. They're better than they were. They've invested, certainly, but they've not won anything since the 60s. They do not have LSU's momentum or recruiting pipeline or fan base or stadium or history, all those type of things. So for Lane Kiffin, he looks down at Ole Miss. LSU, that's where I'm supposed to be. And LSU has won national championships under 3 of the last 4 head coaches that they had. Saban, Les Miles, Ed Orgeron, all won titles. So that is a place that is the expectation for sure. But LSU, that is a place where you win national championships, and it is built for winning. And once the Brian Kelly circus act, he had his own circus act, that blew up, and that job was just sitting there waiting for someone to take it. Lane Kiffin was absolutely going to take it. He would have taken it in the middle of the national championship game. There's no scenario where he would not have taken that job. But of course, with Lane Kiffin, as bad as it is, it can always be worse, and he'll always find the way to make it worse. And the way he made it worse and turn it into a full-on farce, he didn't want just the LSU job. He wanted the LSU job, and he wanted to keep coaching Ole Miss in the playoff. So he wanted the new job, but he also wanted the old job for a while. He wanted to break up with Ole Miss, but he still wanted to be friends with benefits. And when Ole Miss finally came to their sense that went, no, that's not how this works, Kiffin acted like he was in some way the victim and had people on TV with his agent, Jimmy Sexton, painting the picture as if, well, you know what, Ole Miss probably should let him coach in the what? And, people kept saying, is he crazy? How could he think that would ever happen? Well, of course he thought that would happen, because who at Ole Miss has ever told Lane Kiffin no? Who in life has ever told Lane Kiffin no? College football, college coaching, NFL, any coach. If you win, that's all that matters, especially in college. All that matters is you win games. You can do anything. Anything. You run wherever you are the most powerful person there. That's all that matters, is you win. And Lane Kiffin has won at Ole Miss like no one has in a very long time. So of course he probably thought, no one has ever told me no. Why would they tell me no now? That is what college football coaches operate on. Delusional confidence and zero consequences. As long as you win games, you can do and say whatever you want. But, when Ole Miss finally did tell him no, did Lane take the news well? Did he take the high road? Did he thank the school for giving him the opportunity to exit quietly? No, of course not. Lane does what Lane Kiffin does. He goes scorched earth. It always ends ugly. And on his way out the door, he's threatening coaches. You better be on that plane. He's threatening staff. He was basically trying to burn down Ole Miss after building up Ole Miss. It was like watching the Joker in the Dark Knight, walking away from the hospital while it blows up. And one minute he's talking about finding tranquility in Oxford, and the next minute he's telling us how he talked to God, and basically God told him to go to LSU. That's God's thing. God always tells you to go get the more money. Absolutely, Lane. And look, this is who Lane is. Lane is the embodiment of the parable of the scorpion and the frog, right? Why did you sting me? Because that is my nature. And this is Lane Kiffin's nature. This is not new. He's done this every stop along the way. This has been well chronicled. That's what makes this part like kind of funny, because it ends ugly with him, because it always ends ugly with him. And the details might change, the backdrop might change, and the polo shirt that he's wearing might change, but the ending is going to be the same every single time. Now, that said, let's not pretend like Ole Miss is some innocent Disney character in this whole charade. Ole Miss, the Lane Kiffin that went to LSU is the same Lane Kiffin that Ole Miss hired. They didn't hire Mother Teresa. They hired Lane Kiffin because they knew the resume, they knew the good parts, and they knew the bad parts. And they signed up for the deal. They signed up for the deal full bore because you know why? They wanted to win college football games. And if you can win college football games, you can do anything you want. They knew all the bad parts of Lane Kiffin, and they didn't care. They wanted the wins. They wanted national attention, and they've gotten it. They've gotten it in a way that they never had anytime recently. So I often say, especially here, Ole Miss made a deal with the devil, and you don't get to make a deal with the devil and then complain about the heat. And that's exactly what Ole Miss would have you believe, that somehow they've been wronged. You knew what you were doing. And of course, for LSU, they're no better. They write buyout checks at this point like Leonardo DiCaprio firing off those fun coupons on the side of the boat in Wolf of Wall Street. They're still paying Ed Ogeron. They just started paying Brian Kelly. And now it's Lane Kiffin. And his contract is more ridiculous than the previous. $91 million with an 80% buyout and no offset language. The Louisiana governor was just yelling about how irresponsible spending on football coaches can't continue. And then LSU went out. What lesson did they learn? Nothing. They doubled down and probably made a more egregious bet because at least Brian Kelly had been to a national championship game. Now, he wasn't competitive in that game, but before he got to LSU, he had a real track record of success. What's Lane Kiffin's greatest accomplishment? How is this any safer of an investment? It's not. It's just the next move that they're going to pull because no one is actually minding the store. And then we get to the media aspect of this because the media on Lane Kiffin got played like a cheap fiddle. And college football, I mean, the media, they get played and it's like they love to be played. They want to believe the redemption story. They want to sell the redemption story. They want to believe it so bad. Lane Kiffin, the guy who's had all these stops, he was just misunderstood. He was misunderstood at Tennessee, and he's a changed man now. He's completely different. He's not the same guy who's picking fights on Twitter, and he's somehow grown as an individual. And they bought into the narrative. And look, they got hustled. And they wrote these think pieces about how great it felt while it was, oh my God, Lane Kiffin, he's a changed man. No, he's not. No, he's not. So at the end of the day, who's the winners in this? Who's the losers in this? Honestly, everyone's wrong and everyone's full of it. That's the main thing. The only people you can really feel bad for are the Ole Miss players, especially the ones that will remain at Ole Miss and won't be jumping on a flight to LSU at the first chance they get. Because those are the only innocent victims in all of this. They're having their best season. They did what they had to do, and they're 11-1, and now the season is could very well be over for them with their coach off taking a better job in the middle of the dance. They got broken up with in the middle of the dance. But you know what? With the schedule, unless the schedule changes, I don't see how this changes anytime soon. So next year we'll probably be going through maybe the same thing. And look, Lane Kiffin will win at LSU, but he better. He better do it right away because there's no ramp-up period. There's no honeymoon at LSU. You get that contract, you show up, and immediately you are on the hot seat. LSU fans are one of those fan bases that think that they should win a national title every other year, maybe every year, like clockwork, and anything less is failure. So either he wins big fast or the same boosters who welcomed him with open arms, they'll be trying to buy him out in 18 months. It would not shock me that would happen at all. But however it goes, I think you can also bet pretty safely this will end ugly because that's what always happens with Lane Kiffin. It always ends ugly. And it might end, he might have a national championship and that will justify it. But it seems like it only gets more and more ridiculous in college football every single year. And what we know is that the leaders of the sport are the ones who are probably the most full of it. That's what we basically know about college football. And look, as viewers, we'll keep watching because college football, while it is a cesspool, it is damn entertaining. And the back and forth this weekend was entertaining. And in this day and age, engagement is currency. And college football's cup in that area certainly runneth over. Hey, before we move on to the baseball hot stove, can we just kind of hit on a couple of the details of Lane Kiffin's contract with LSU? Because it's almost like a prank. It's almost like his agent was pranking LSU, asking for some of the stuff that they wound up getting. Now, first off, it's 7 years, $91 million, which sounds outrageous for a guy who's never won a national championship, has never been close to winning a national championship. But okay, big job, big money. I get that. That's what you needed to get the guy, to land the guy. The money is the money. Okay. But when you get into the details of the contract, it's like a fever dream. He gets an 80% buyout if LSU fires him for performance. So that is 80% is $70 million. So if he goes out next year and wins 5 games, LSU fans will riot. And LSU, if they want to fire him, they will have to pay him $70 million. And the contract has no offset language. So if they fire him after, say, year 1, and he goes out and gets another contract, LSU still has to cut the check. That's amazing. And given how dysfunctional LSU has been, and given how, Lane Kiffin's career has kind of gone, what are the odds that happens? It's not zero, I can tell you that much. Then the other part that really sends this into the stratosphere, LSU is paying Lane Kiffin incentives based on how Ole Miss plays. If Ole Miss, his old team, wins the national championship, he will get $1 million. That is, I wouldn't even have thought to ask for that. Now, that was contract language he had in his Ole Miss deal, which makes sense. I wouldn't think that LSU would pick it up and say, hey, you know what? Even though you're not coaching the team, easiest million. That is galaxy brain stuff, man. I wouldn't even have thought to ask for that. And then he's already coming in as the second highest paid head coach in college football. And when you take the LSU job, you're expected to win national championships, at least one. And if he does go out and do what he's supposed to do, what his contract is meant for, why he's getting paid $91 million, he gets a new contract that makes him the highest paid coach in all of college football. So in 3 years, if he finally wins a college, who knows? He might jump a bunch of other guys. It's unbelievable. It's almost impossible to fire the guy. And oh yeah, by the way, this comes less than a year after everyone at LSU had found religion. The boosters and the governor and the fans screaming about Brian Kelly's contract and the being financially irresponsible. And they threw a fit for what seemed like weeks, stomping their feet. This is ridiculous. This guy's paying 400 rounds of golf, which does seem like a lot of golf. We got to pay him $54 million. That's nothing. This guy, you got to pay 70 walking in the door. So you would think, did they learn their lesson? Did they try something different? No, they did not. They did the same exact thing. Lane Kiffin didn't win this job. He won the lottery. And maybe the most preposterous thing about this entire contract came from Lane himself, which is almost perfect. When at his press conference, he said, I don't even really know what my contract is. I'm not even really sure what I'm getting paid. Do you believe him? Do you think you could find anyone in America that would actually believe that Lane Kiffin does not know what his contract at LSU is? I find that highly, highly doubtful. All right, let's get into the baseball hot stove because we got a couple of contracts that have come down, and it feels like in the next week or so we're going to start to see some moves. But I think there's one player who's going to be waiting a while, and the signs are there. I think I've already hit on this before, but I've got a bad memory, so who knows? The two deals that have already come down, Dylan Cease with the Blue Jays, and then, of course, Devin Williams with the Mets. Cease, 7 years, $210, and Williams, 3 years, $51. And you might be saying to yourself, well, these two guys, how are they getting these contracts when they're coming off these bad years? Bad years and you're still getting paid like these monster deals? And they are monster deals, right? $30 million a year for Dylan Cease, who has been really good at times and has certainly struggled at times. Certainly this past year he has. And Devin Williams, Yankee fans are doing backflips that Devin Williams is not going to be back. And you have to ask the question, I think a lot of fans are asking, why are teams shelling out so much money for guys who were not good last season and guys who had super high ERAs, right? Like batting average and ERAs are two stats that baseball fans love to use. Well, here's the thing. Baseball teams don't use ERA anymore. And The Athletic kind of hit on this, kind of stole my thunder, but I'll just kind of lay out my arguments as well. These are not the tools that any baseball front office is still using to judge pitchers, ERAs or batting average. They have far different stats that tell you far more. And the ERA, it really doesn't tell you what you think it tells you. Yes, it tells you Devin Williams had a bad year, But when you're talking about free agency, you're talking about predicting. You're talking about what the guy is going to do. So last year, Devin Williams had a strand rate of 55%. So preventing runners who he put on base from scoring. 55%, basically a coin flip, which sounds bad. And you would be right. It's really bad. It's actually horrendously bad. But here's the context. League average for relievers is usually about 71, 72%. Anything more than 60 or 65 is considered terrible, awful. So Williams was worse than awful. He was at 55%. But here's the thing. Strand rate swings wildly from year to year. It's incredibly luck driven. And Devin Williams, his career strand rate, if you take a look at the bulk of his work before he became a Yankee, it was at 82%. That's what you would kind of expect for one of the best relievers in baseball. So when you have this one year that's horrendously bad and all these other years that are historically good, that's what you call an outlier. And when you fix that single number to what his ERA, it looks like he was a guy last year who was just a bit unlucky. So when teams look at pitchers, especially relievers, they're looking at other stats. They are looking at his peripheral stats. And even while fans might be complaining about the ERA, those other stats that teams are looking at, those were still elite. So when you talk about his chase rate, he was 97%. He was 97% in whiff rate. He was 97 percentile in strikeout rate. So this was still a guy who had elite stuff. Now, it didn't translate into performance in a new team, in a new situation, but basically he was still one of the best pitchers to be able to miss bats, swing and miss stuff. And missing bats, that is really important. That's what teams are looking for. That's what every organization is trying to identify and trying to develop. So another stat, while I know fans love ERA, it's what we were brought up on. It's on the back of the baseball card, right? That's old school ERA. But teams don't use that. They look at other stats. Another stat that you can look at, and what they want to get is, what is the pitcher or what is the player actually responsible for, and what is the possibility of being able to translate this moving forward? And fielding independent pitching, FIP, that is, I think, what teams look at far more. And it looks at what the pitcher actually controls. So that would be strikeouts, that would be walks, and that would be home runs. It throws out, they talk about the signal and the noise. You want to be able to separate the noise from what is the actual data telling you. And with Devin Williams this past year, when you take a look at what he actually controlled, the ERA kind of threw that off. So imagine you're a quarterback and you're getting penalized for drop passes, or you're getting penalized for your left tackle missing a block. That's what FIP tries to eliminate, all the stuff that's outside of Williams's control. And he had the biggest gap in all of baseball between ERA and his FIP. So that would be generally a giant red flag that says this guy didn't really perform as poorly as you think. It was early on in the season for the most part. He had some flare-ups in a new situation, and teams are going to be willing to take a chance on that. Now, not everything was fluky. His fastball and his changeup were not as strong last year. He lost some vertical break on his off-speed, so his stuff plus and all these other different stats, that's why when hitters did square him up, they hit him harder than usual. But I think teams are looking at, and the Mets looked at, especially David Stern, somebody who knows Devin Williams well, that when you take a look at, hard hit rates or exit velocity or barrel rates, they're not concerning in the long term. Nothing in the profile really says decline as much as it says this was a fluky bad year, but there's a correction coming, and this guy can get back to who he was. So teams don't believe in the old school stats anymore, of certainly not ERA. They're looking at strikeouts. They're looking at your stuff. They're looking at whiffs, swings, and misses, all that kind of stuff. And I do think that they probably look a little at track record as well. If this were year 3 of Devin Williams' career, maybe it would be different. But the underlying metrics show stability in the course of his career. And Williams checks a lot of those boxes. And I think that he's going to be a really good signing. Now, I think like most people, prefer him to be the setup guy to Edwin Diaz, and now you have a two-headed monster, hopefully at the back of your rotation. But it's the same thing with Toronto and Dylan Cease. coming off a rocky year to get $210 million. They're not focusing on his ERA. They're looking at his durability, one of the most durable pitchers, and his strikeout ability. He is one of the highest strikeout rates. Now, he also has high walks, high wild pitches. So I would not say I agree on everything. I would be a little bit more leery on Williams moving forward, especially if he is your closer. I'm just making the point that if you're looking at guys signing these contracts, man, why are these guys signing such high contracts? They are not judging things on ERA, and they're not judging things on batting average. So I think that moves are going to start to happen here. I certainly hope so with the baseball offseason. I hate when we get into late December, early January, we're still waiting for moves. But there is one guy who I think is going to be waiting for a move. And I think I've said this before on the podcast. I'm not sure. If Pete Alonso returns to the Mets, that will be the clearest possible sign that Steve Cohen has overruled David Stearns. Everything that has been talked about and that has actually happened this offseason has shown you there is no real universe where David Stearns would want to sink massive resources into Pete Alonso. He's simply, if you're talking about projection, right? Moving forward, not what this guy has done, what this guy will do. Pete Alonso is not a guy who projects to have a good second half of his career. Defensive inefficiency, one-dimensional slugger, hitting his 30s, looking for a massive contract. And I think that this is going to be a problem for Pete. There's no real market for Pete Alonso. Not at the level that Scott Boras thought that they would find. And I'm sure the one that Pete Alonso is looking for. And Jeff Passan basically said this, that Alonso and Boras are still waiting for a team to step to the forefront as a legitimate favorite, meaning there's no real bidding process so far. And the reason I think is simple, that almost every team is run by somebody who thinks like David Stearns. He's not the outlier. Analytically driven teams are not going to give a 5-year contract to a slugger whose value is tied in to simply home runs. Bad fielder, bad runner, doesn't hit for average. And I get that Pete's frustrated. I get it. He's a homegrown star. He's been a fan favorite since he showed up. He's the polar bear. And he has watched Steve Cohen, the owner of the Mets, hand out contracts like Monopoly money. Hand out contracts like Halloween candy. Just not to him. Pete's motivation this offseason is singular. He wants the most money. He is going, you don't switch agents to Scott Boras for a hometown discount. He is looking to cash in. But unfortunately, the one team that wildly overspends is the team now that is being run by David Stearns. And here's the part that Met fans really need to sit with. If the Mets end up offering him the most money, which is probably the only way he comes back, is that Steve Cohen overriding his GM? Because to me, I think I've definitely said this before, that would be a major mistake. Steve Cohen, real world genius. He is not a baseball genius. He is nothing close to a baseball genius. You hope that David Stearns is a baseball genius. The way the Mets become a sustainable winner is by actually following the blueprint of the guy they hired to run baseball operations, David Stearns. We have not really seen his way of doing things yet. This is year 3. He built a winner in Milwaukee, and he did it by maximizing defense and run prevention, constructing a roster where average pitchers looked better because of the defense behind them and because that defense was airtight. Look at his early moves this offseason, moving off Nimmo's contract to get a Gold Glove second baseman, improving that infield defense immediately. Also, the talk about Framber Valdez being a possible interest to the Mets at the top of their rotation. They need to go get somebody. And if they do get Valdez, that would be another sign. This is a guy who is tailor-made for run prevention. He is a ground ball specialist. So you don't build a team. If those moves do, now the Nimmo one already happened, but if they do have to go after Valdez, you don't build that team to then put a 30-year-old basically DH and pop him in at first base and pay him $150 million. So to me, the real question now is not, if you want to get people into a bidding war, you have to figure out which analytically driven front office is going to step up and give Pete the contract that he's looking for. 5 years, $150 million, 6 years. I think it would be hard to find that team. And right now, at least, the answer is pretty simple. No one is stepping up to give him that contract, and certainly not the New York Mets.
Remember college? Well, now, college is over, and here comes your student loan debt. Is your private student loan debt keeping you up at night? You really need to talk to YRefi. YRefi refinances distressed or defaulted private student loans that others won't touch. They can save you thousands of dollars and get you a custom payment that you can afford. And they don't care what your credit score is. Don't let private student loan debt ruin your life. Call YRefi today.
All right, finally, let's talk a little NBA and a team that is completely floating under the radar, and that would be the Phoenix Suns. Now, look, I understand. We're only about 20 or something games into the season, and the NBA season, it's all the importance is later on. But I got to be honest, I didn't think there would be any portion of the season where I would be talking about the Phoenix Suns this year as being a hot topic. Not after the way last year went with all the dysfunction, and even after the start of this year. Now, they're 13-9, which doesn't sound great, but they started 1-4. So since then, they've won 12 of 17. They're right in the thick of things out west. And right now, at least, they are playing like a completely different group than the one we saw the first week or so of the season, and certainly than the one we saw last year. Monday, maybe their most impressive performance. They go into LA against a Laker team that was riding a 7-game winning streak. 10 minutes or so into the game, Devin Booker grabs his groin, so he's done for the night. And you figure, all right, well, there goes the chances of maybe pulling off a win against the Lakers, who were at full strength. Luka was there, LeBron was playing, Austin Reeves was good. Everybody suited up and ready to go. And Phoenix absolutely smoked them. They outscored the Lakers in the second and third quarters 65-46, and they cruised to an easy 125-108 win. So you start to think to yourself, let's look at the numbers a little bit of how this happens. And really, since that 1-4 start, Phoenix has been top 10 in offense and top 10 in defense. Their rookie head coach, Jordan Ott, has them playing an inspired style of basketball, disciplined, aggressive, especially on defense. And that's really where I think the whole thing starts, is defensively. Right now, through the games on Monday, December 1st, the Suns right now lead the entire NBA in steals per game. They're averaging 10.6 a night, number one in the entire NBA, even ahead of the defending champions, the Oklahoma City Thunder, who are at 10.4. And those guys are just an absolute juggernaut. And the leap from last year, it's night and day. Last year, Phoenix was bottom of the league. I think they were 28th in steals, second to last or something like that. This year, they've gone from the bottom of the league to the top of the league. That's not natural improvement. That is a complete identity shift. And you have to give the coach and I guess the players a good amount of credit. They forced the second highest turnover rate in the NBA, behind only OKC. It's always good to be on any list with the Thunder at this point. And, you know, even without Durant, who's gone, and Beal, who's gone, they are lighting up teams from three. Sixth in the league in three-point percentage at 37.7%. And that's without Devin Booker or Dylan Brooks really shooting that well early on. They're a combined 31%. So when those guys eventually regress to what they typically do, I think you have to watch out. So I think Jordan Ott deserves a massive amount of credit. I'd never heard the name Jordan Ott before he got the job with Phoenix. He's done a great job. Grayson Allen, Royce O'Neal are cashing threes. I mean, they're playing really, really well. They've added Brooks, and Mark Williams has certainly made a major change in the defensive stability of the team. But you have to give credit to the head coach. And the NBA is not generally a coaching league, but when it looks this different, I think he's established a new identity. And this was a team that couldn't score or defend for the first week or so. They had turnovers left and right, and they were one of the worst offenses in the league. And now it's a completely different puzzle. They look energized. They look like they believe in what they're doing, and they have a cohesive game plan. Now, again, 20 or so games into the season, maybe this fades over time. But for a team that seemed like they were dead in the water after last year, no draft capital anytime soon, the Suns' turnaround this year through 20 games or whatever it has been the biggest surprise so far in the NBA to me. All right, that's going to do it for another episode of Gordon Damer on Sports. If you've not done it already, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. It really does help out the podcast, and we'll be back later this week with a fresh edition of Gordon Damer on Sports.